Today I'm sharing all of my absolute favorite makeup products. I'm doing an updated version of my top 3 makeup products in every category. This is something I typically do every fall just to kind of update you on everything that I'm absolutely loving. And it's interesting to me because some products remain the same year after year, like they really can't be topped. And then some of these products have actually replaced older favorites as brands launch new formulas and they just kind of up the quality as a whole. Sometimes products that I always thought would be at the top no longer are. So I'm excited to update you and share products that I just truly love. I have a mix of drugstore and high-end. I didn't want to do 2 separate versions of this video because I truly wanted to choose like my absolute favorites in every category, regardless of the price. So you'll see a good mix. I mean, a lot of the time drugstore products really do beat high-end for me, and then sometimes there are high-end products that I truly think are worth the price point. So this might be a little bit of a longer video. I'll put timestamps in the description box below so you can jump ahead or skip around, but let's kick it off with complexion products. So for face primer, my #1 favorite is actually the e.l.f. Power Grip with Niacinamide. In some of these categories, I don't necessarily have like a #1 favorite, but when it comes to face primer, I definitely do. This is like my perfect all-around primer. It's hydrating, it's tacky, so your makeup actually lasts longer, and it leaves your skin looking so glowy and healthy, but because it locks your makeup into place, it's not like your foundation is going to slide right off like other glowy primers. This is something that I can use no matter what time of the year it is. During the winter time, because it is a super hydrating formula. During the summertime, because it has like that sticky, tacky grip to it. It really is like my #1 primer, and it goes so well with pretty much any foundation I pair it with. So I had to recommend this one. The next primer is also from e.l.f. This is actually a little bit of a newer launch, but it's so good. I've used it enough that I can confidently say it is one of my top 3. It's the e.l.f. Liquid Poreless Putty Primer. This is the perfect option if you want your skin to feel and look incredibly smooth. The next primer is also a smoothing primer, but what I like about this one is it actually leaves my skin feeling matte, but not dry. I think I mentioned their Poreless Putty Primer in a previous version of this video, or maybe the matte one, and I still like the original, but I like the way this applies better. Because it is a liquid, it's very easy to spread it all over your face. It's very silky, so I feel like it blends into the skin effortlessly. And again, the original one is still really good. I personally just prefer the way this goes on. And I think that it keeps my skin pretty matte throughout the day, which I don't think was a claim. It does claim to extend the wear of your foundation. And oddly enough, I find when I wear this product, my foundation does last a lot longer throughout the day. And that's not necessarily the case with the original one. So these are both long-lasting primers, but in different ways. Like this leaves your skin looking super glowy, feeling really hydrated. This one is more of like a smoothing, mattifying primer, but at the end of the day, my foundation is still in place really well with both of them. And because they're both from e.l.f., they're definitely on the more affordable side. I do have a higher end primer that I wanted to share in today's video. This one is from Caliray. It's the So Blown Clean Blurring Primer. To be honest, I haven't had the best luck with Caliray. I don't find a lot of their products are absolute favorites of mine. I've tried a couple. I mean, I don't think they have a super big line right now, but this primer is so good. It's very weightless. It almost has like a little bit of an airy texture to it. And again, it blends into the skin very easily. It's somewhat similar to the e.l.f. Liquid Poreless Putty Primer, but it doesn't leave my skin feeling and looking quite as matte. And I would say it's even more smoothing than the e.l.f. one. Whenever I wear foundation on top of this primer, it looks so good. You can have a foundation that will enhance all of the texture on your skin. And if you're wearing this primer underneath, it's like a completely different foundation. It doesn't highlight the texture. It doesn't sink into the fine lines. It really looks amazing. So I am really impressed by this product. I definitely think it's worth the money. Speaking of foundation, 2 of my favorite foundations are from Catrice. I just think they've done a really great job with their complexion formulas. So this is something I've loved for years. I don't even know what year I tried this. I want to say it was like back in 2016. Maybe even earlier. Like this has been a formula that I've had in my collection for years. I've gone through quite a few bottles of this. It is the Catrice HD Liquid Coverage Foundation. I have been using this pretty much all summer long. It's such a good formula. If you have oily skin, I highly recommend trying this out. It is a very thin, runny formula. It almost feels like a serum foundation, but a lot of serum foundations end up looking really natural on the skin. They have light coverage, and that is not the case with this one. This one is definitely a medium to full coverage foundation. You can sheer it out, and if you use like a glowy base underneath and really blend it into the skin, it actually doesn't look quite as matte, but it still has that longevity. It stays in place extremely well. It says that it's water and sweat proof. If I want to wear foundation on like a 90-degree day, like we were out of town visiting Brady's family in August and we were doing some things outside and I wanted to wear foundation that day. So I applied this and I set it into place with powder and setting spray. But at the end of the day, at the end of a 90-degree day, like it still looked so good. So I will always have this in my collection. A few years ago, they launched their True Skin Hydrating Foundation, which is a lot different than the one that I just mentioned. This one is meant to be more hydrating. It's made with hyaluronic acid. As far as hydrating foundations go, I would not consider this to be the most hydrating, but it could be more of a hydrating option, again, if you have oily or combo skin, because it has a really pretty natural satin finish. It's not overly glowy or overly dewy, but again, it's like the type of foundation where if you pair it with a certain primer, it almost adapts to that primer. It looks pretty on the skin, and I've gone through, again, so many bottles of this. So if Catrice ever launches another foundation, I will be the first in line. Honestly, I couldn't really decide which foundation to include in the third spot, so I went with this one because it's a tried and true favorite. It's the Fenty Pro Filt'r Soft Matte Foundation. This is not something I wear every single day. There was definitely a time where I was wearing this nonstop, and I repurchased it, I think in the beginning of 2023, and there's definitely a time and place for it. If I want my makeup to last all day, if I want like a full coverage matte perfected look, then I will end up reaching for this one. I think the perception is that full coverage matte foundations automatically look super heavy, really cakey on the skin, and that definitely doesn't have to be the case. And I think Fenty did such a good job with this foundation formula, and of course the shade range. It really is definitely one of my staples for sure. If you have dry skin, I wouldn't really recommend this one, whereas I do think the Catrice one could maybe still work for dry skin if you pair it with a glowy primer, but this one is like fully matte. So as for concealer, I think maybe all of my answers are different this year. Maybe I included one of these in last year's video. I kind of went through the list, but I forget now. But I know two of them are newer because they actually launched in 2023. So the first one is from Natasha Denona. I think this is going to be my favorite concealer of all time, unless a brand launches something better, but I have used this almost every single day since I purchased it. This is the Natasha Denona Hyglam Concealer. It looks amazing on the skin. It looks really skin-like, but it's also very smooth and it has pretty good coverage. So if you deal with fine lines, this is perfect because the coverage level is there, but it doesn't look heavy or cakey. It does settle into fine lines a little bit, but once I set it, I'm good to go. It has a really beautiful, like moisturized feel to it on the skin, but I always set mine into place with powder and it just wears well throughout the day. It also looks amazing as a spot concealer. I love this. I feel like I'll never stop raving about it. Earlier this year, Flower Beauty launched their Get Real Serum Concealer, which is such a good formula as well. The name kind of threw me off. Like I did not try this right away because whenever a brand includes the name serum in their concealer or their foundation, for some reason, like I always think it's just going to melt off my skin and it's going to settle into fine lines and look super messy. That's not the case with this one. It definitely feels really hydrating on the skin, but again, it has pretty good coverage. It's very creamy and it has a really pretty smooth quality to it. So this has definitely been one of my favorites as well. You can build this one up or you can sheer it out. It's very customizable and I think it wears so nicely throughout the day. Now, if you want a truly hydrating formula, I do recommend the Catrice True Skin. I would almost describe this one as like a serum-like concealer. It's definitely thinner than Flower Beauty or Natasha Denona and a lot more hydrating, and it looks really glowy. So I'm kind of surprised that I like this one so much because my skin does tend to be a little bit more oily. But again, once I set it into place with powder, it doesn't move. And sometimes you just want like that beautiful, thin, super hydrating formula under the eyes, especially during the winter time if you deal with any sort of dryness or your skin's a little irritated. This just feels good. I wouldn't say it has like actual cooling properties to it, but it almost feels like that. Like, does anyone else feel like that? It feels kind of refreshing on the skin. I don't know if I'm just making that up, but every time I use this, I love the way it feels and looks and applies. It's just a really nice experience. Okay, finishing up the complexion category with powder. It was kind of hard for me to narrow it down to my favorite powders because I love powders. I kind of want to go through and do like a full overview on every powder I have in my collection and what I use it for and who I would recommend it to. I did a video like that a few years ago. I feel like it could be a potentially boring topic if you're not into powder, but if you're into powder, it's just there are so many good options out there. Okay, so this is probably one of my oldest favorites, the Flower Beauty Light Illusion. Again, I've gone through so many of these. I actually think it is a really good dupe for the Charlotte Tilbury Airbrush Flawless Finish Powder. I recently repurchased that because it's kind of been on my wish list for a while. It was my favorite powder of all time until I found this one, and I thought they were basically the same. The Charlotte Tilbury powder is really gorgeous, but it's very expensive, and I go through powder fast. Like, I wear a lot of powder, not as much these days as I used to, but anyway, if you're looking for a more affordable alternative, definitely try this one out. It is very pretty on the skin. It has a little bit of coverage, so it does have like that nice perfecting quality. You can use it to set your foundation into place. You can use it to like lightly dust over everything and just diffuse the edges. And again, I think what's nice about this is it just kind of perfects the skin and gives you like a beautiful airbrush finish, just like the Charlotte Tilbury one claims. On days where I want like a very light powder, if I'm wearing a lot of cream products or I just want like my glowy products to show through, I don't necessarily need my skin to look super matte, or I don't need my makeup to stay in place all day long, I'll reach for the LYS Triple Fix Powder. This is such a good powder. I also like this under the eyes too. It's very light, super fine. So it's not a powdery looking powder. It just looks perfect on the skin. This is the type of powder that's meant for people who don't like powder or who have like a bad idea of powder in their mind. Like, if you think your powder is going to look really dry, super powdery, try this. You'll be really impressed. It's gorgeous. The third powder I wanted to include is actually this one from Huda Beauty. This took me a little while to try, and I don't know why, because it is a very popular product, and I was kind of looking for like a good loose powder that I could use when I wanted my makeup to last forever, and this is perfect. It's the Easy Bake Loose Baking and Setting Powder. So I've been using this a ton during the summer because I find this to be incredibly mattifying, and it also extends the wear of my makeup so well. I have this on today. Typically, I'll use it to set my under eye concealer and then set the rest of my face as well. And I will use like one of those little velour triangular sponges under my eyes and just like a large fluffy brush for the rest of my face. This keeps my skin matte all day long. I will say this one looks a little powdery. It's not like an undetectable powder by any means. And if you go in with like a large fluffy brush, you're going to get more of a diffused look. But the reason why I like this is because it really sets everything into place. Like, my makeup is not moving when I reach for this product. So there's definitely a time and a place for it. Okay, let's talk cheek products. I think a lot of my answers have changed when it comes to bronzer, blush, and highlighter because my preferences have changed. And now I'm definitely into creams and liquids, and that was not the case a few years ago. So as far as bronzer goes, actually, you know what? Maybe I mentioned these last year. I just read over my answers yesterday and I'm already blanking. This has been a favorite for years. Let's start with the powder bronzer. I just repurchased it. It is the Flower Beauty Heatwave Luminous Bronzer in the shade Sunrise. This is my favorite bronzer shade. It's really pretty on the skin. My issue with bronzer for a long time was that they always ended up looking too orangey and too just like streaky and muddy on my skin. So it was really hard for me to find a very seamless formula that wasn't orange. And the reason why I like this one is because it has more of like a rosy undertone to it. So it's really pretty on the skin. If you are not really into super orange looking bronzers, try this one. It's very smooth. It has a little bit of like a glowy powder mixed in. So it's not full on like shimmery on the skin, but it's almost like the hourglass powders, where it just brightens up the skin in a very natural way. And it's very weightless, very pretty on the skin. So I highly recommend this if you're looking for a powder bronzer. If you want a cream bronzer, the Makeup Revolution, what is this called? Ultra Cream Bronzer is my favorite. I'm like, mine looks like an absolute mess because I use this one so much. I never in a million years thought I would use up a bronzer, let alone a cream bronzer, because I just wasn't into cream bronzers for a long time. But this is an $8 bronzer that looks good every time I use it. It's pretty pigmented, so a little bit goes a long way. It's very creamy, like it definitely has a dewy glow to it and a really pretty sheen, but it actually stays in place really well. Like, I can use this in the summertime, which is shocking to me because I always thought creams would wear off so fast if it was hot outside, but this one stays in place extremely well. It is so pretty, and I'm sure I'll use it up by the end of the year. I did end up repurchasing it. I thought I was a little bit closer to using it up than I am, but it does last a very, very long time. The other cream bronzer I love is this one from Makeup by Mario. If you're a cream stick fan rather than like an actual compact with the blusher bronzer inside, try this one because this goes on really nicely. Like you can actually draw this onto the face and it's not going to lift the makeup underneath. Typically I do just apply it directly to my brush and then stipple it on the skin. But again, this is a very long-lasting formula. Even on like a super humid day, this will not move. It's not quite as creamy as the Makeup Revolution formula, so you do have to work just a little bit harder to blend it out. And I wouldn't say it has like a matte finish, but it's definitely not as glowy as Makeup Revolution. So if you want more of like that natural satin finish, I would go with Makeup by Mario. It was kind of hard to narrow it down to my top 3 blushes because I love blush. I feel like I could do an entire video on my favorite blushes, but I did it for today's video. My number 1 blush of all time is this one from Patrick Ta. This is the Double Take Cream and Powder Blush, specifically in the shade She's So LA. I do have a few other ones, and I mean, really, you can't go wrong with them no matter what duo you go with, but this is my favorite because it just kind of, it's like the perfect everyday option. And it's also great because you can build it up to look more dramatic on the skin. These are gorgeous. They come with a cream and a powder. You can wear them together or alone. And this cream is perfect to work with. Patrick Ta designed these so you actually wear the cream on top of the powder. And because of that, I don't find that it's a formula that ends up looking heavy on the skin. It looks so pretty whether you're wearing it directly on your foundation or on top of makeup that's been set with powder. It's so beautiful. It just gives you like this luminous glow, and the powder alone is really nice too. So this is like my number 1 blush. I feel like I couldn't be without it. Whenever I travel, I throw this in my bag. I have to have it with me. Of course, I had to include the Rare Beauty liquid blushes. I'm definitely a fan. I actually mixed these 2 shades together. So I'm wearing a little bit of Hope and then a little bit of Encourage. These completely changed my mind about liquid blush. I always thought liquid blush would just be not for me. I've tried some in the past that have been hard to blend out. They've looked streaky. They lift all of my foundation underneath. And this formula is so different. It almost has like a little bit of an oily texture to it, which I feel like is a weird way to explain it. But because of that, it just blends out so beautifully every single time. It does give you like that second skin finish. So I like these because they're not overly glowy. They just look really natural, so pretty, and incredibly soft on the skin. I really couldn't decide which blush to include in the 3rd spot. So I went with a formula that I've actually been using nonstop in 2023. And these are the newer, they're not, when did they launch? Maybe like in the spring, the Essence Pure Nude Baked Blushes. My labels have pretty much worn off because I use these all the time. I think at this point I have the majority of the shades they offer because I truly love this formula. I do love a good baked blush because it gives your skin like that beautiful lit from within glow, but it applies like a powder and it wears like a powder, which some days I just want like a good staple powder blush. These are very lightweight, really pretty on the skin, but you can also build them up, and they have some really pretty light, softer shades, but also some deeper berry tones too. For highlighter last year, I actually only had 2 answers because there really weren't like 3 top highlighters in my collection. And that has definitely changed because I fell in love with liquid highlighters and even cream highlighters too. And one new powder highlighter. This one is from Rare Beauty. It's specifically in the shade Exhilarate, but I like all 3 of the shades that I've tried from this line. This is definitely my number 1 highlighter formula. It is so lightweight. It has like this pretty glass-like finish to it, and it's not something that I've really been able to achieve with any other powder highlight. It's a very silky, super smooth formula. Like it doesn't feel or look like you're wearing a powder on the skin. You just get the beautiful glass-like sheen that you're looking for in a highlighter. So I love this formula. I use it as an inner corner highlight. Oh, today I have it on as an inner corner highlight in like the light pearly shade. I'll also use it as eyeshadow highlighter. Like I just want to apply this all over my skin. It is my number 1 favorite formula for sure. This actually replaced another formula I love, the Becca Shimmering Skin Perfectors. These are pretty old. I'm sure this one's expired at this point. I should probably end up repurchasing it. But before the Rare Beauty highlighter, like this was my #1 favorite ever since it launched in collaboration with Jaclyn Hill like a million years ago. And it's still one of my go-to formulas. Very pretty on the skin. Not quite as lightweight as the Rare Beauty formula, but still a really good option. And then as far as liquid highlighters go, I love this one from Flower Beauty, the Spotlight Liquid Highlighter, specifically in the shade Opal. This looks so pretty on the skin. It's very easy to work with. You can just apply it directly from the applicator onto your cheek. What I typically do is apply it to the back of my hand and then use like a light stippling brush and kind of like stipple it on, or apply it with my finger too. It doesn't pick up the foundation underneath. It melts into the skin in a really pretty way. It's just very creamy, very, very smooth. And I know there are more expensive alternatives, but Flower Beauty did such a good job with this formula. I'm still waiting on them to come out with a blush formula in this packaging. I think like a glowy blush or even like pink tones in this formula would be so perfect. Okay, let's move on to eye products. So I was actually going to skip eyeshadow palettes. It was really hard for me to narrow it down. I love so many eyeshadow palettes in my collection, and I recently did a video on, or maybe it was a few months ago, if I could only keep 10 palettes, which ones would I choose? I'll link it below if you want to check it out, but I decided to just narrow it down to 3. Like I love these 3 palettes so much, and they really are like some of my most used and my favorites for different reasons. So let's start with this one, or what do I have on my eyes today? This one. This is the Natasha Denona Retro palette. For a lot of years, my top Natasha Denona palette was the bronze palette. And when I really think about it, like sometimes I'm like, no, that's my favorite. No, this one. It's a hard choice because I love them both so much. But I really do love this one because there's a lot of variation in this palette. Obviously, if you love like pink and purpley tones, but I think within the bronze palette, a lot of the shades end up looking pretty similar on the eyes. Whereas with this one, I can get a little bit of a warmer look, a little bit of a cooler look, something super sparkly or something fully matte. I do have this on my eyes today. I have this shade in the crease, this one as like a brow bone highlight, kind of to diffuse the edges, this color all over the lid, and then this one in the crease in the outer corner. It's a gorgeous palette. The color story is amazing and the quality is so good. There are a lot of different textures going on in this palette, both with the mattes and the shimmers. You get her typical matte shadows. You also get some of her cream to powder matte shadows. You have some really beautiful, like intense sparkling metallics, some satins, some just like regular metallics. It really is such a stunning palette, and I enjoy using it every single time. My next favorite has like a somewhat similar color story. It's the Patrick Ta Major Dimension 2. I love everything about this palette. I love the way it's set up. You get a full row of shimmers, a full row of mattes, and then you get 2 creams as well. I do use these creams more than I ever thought I would, but I always say this, I wish these 2 were just like an extra shimmer and an extra matte in 2 deeper shades. I feel like that would have been perfect. Patrick Ta's matte shadows are really nice. They're very rich, super intense, but you can also blend them out. They're not too difficult to work with, but I think the standout formula for me would be the metallics. They're very beautiful, and they have like this creaminess to them. They almost feel like they're primer infused eyeshadows. So they actually stick to the eye really, really well for something that looks a lot more glittery and intense than other shimmers. I also love the color story. I just think there's a lot you can do with this, whether you do want to stick with like this half of the palette and do something lighter, or this half and go really dramatic and smoky. It's just so gorgeous. I feel like I love everything about it. The third palette I chose is one that I just use all the time, like almost every single day, because I might incorporate it into my look if I'm using a palette that's missing one of these shades, or if I'm in a hurry, I'll just use this, and then sometimes I'll pull in a single shadow. It's the e.l.f. Bite Size palette in I Love You a Latte. This is such a good formula. It's a very powdery formula, but it's so smooth, very buildable, very blendable. So what I love about this is you can get like a light sheer wash of color, or you can build it up to look a little more intense. I mean, obviously the first 3 shades in here are pretty light, but I feel like it works well for my skin tone because I'll use this as like a brow bone highlight, or I'll use it to set my eyeshadow into place. And then there's like a warmer, cooler tone shade and there's a warmer transition shade and a cooler transition shade. And sometimes I'll use those in the crease and then a dark brown to use in the outer corner or as a smoky liner. So I love it. I think it comes in handy so much. It's just a very beautiful, soft formula. So if I'm using something that's a little more difficult to blend out and I have some really intense, harsh edges, I'll just grab this on a brush and lightly blend out the edges and it looks good every time. And this is like a $4 palette. It's amazing. As for eyeliner, I did split them into two categories, liquid liner and then pencil liner, because they're very, very different. For liquid liner, one of my favorites is the Urban Decay Perversion. I guess I don't have that on hand. I thought I did. Maybe I used it up recently, but that's been a favorite for years. I love that one because it has a brush tip that just glides on the eyes. It's very dark and dramatic and it stays in place really well for me. Recently, I tried the Niacinamide eyeliner, and this one is even more dramatic than Urban Decay. I don't think it stays in place quite as well as Urban Decay. Oh no, mine kind of looks like it's leaking. That hasn't really been an issue for me. Maybe I was storing it upside down. I'm just going to close it so I don't get it all over. But this brush tip is a little bit thinner. It's more tapered. So when I do want like a very sharp wing, I use this. And then the third one is from Tarte. It's actually a felt tip liner, but it's a dual-sided liner. So you get a kind of like micro felt tip, which is super small. So it's great for like a mini wing, or if you want a very precise application, or if you tend to do kind of like graphic liner, it's great. And then on the other end, you get a really light nude, which I typically use on my waterline to brighten things up. So this really comes in handy too. I think all three of them are great options depending on what you're going for. You could probably find one that would work really well for you. As far as pencil liner goes, I chose liners that stay in place really well on the waterline, but liners you could also use on the upper lash line too. These Persona Cosmetics eyeliners do not move. Like, they are one of the longest lasting formulas I've ever tried. They only have 4 shades, but all 4 of the shades are really beautiful. There's like a black, a deep berry plum, a brown, and then also a really pretty copper. So I love these on the waterline because I know they're not going to move, but they're also really pretty on the upper lash line when I don't want to use a liquid liner, but I still want something a little bit more dramatic because the majority of the shades are pretty deep. So these are perfect. Definitely recommend trying these out. Persona, they never miss. Like, all of their products are so good. I also think the Too Faced Killer Liners are a great option for the waterline too. They do have more shades than Persona, including some lighter, softer shades, and I think they stay in place great too. I would say the formulas are pretty similar. Maybe Persona's formula is like slightly creamier as I'm applying it, but they both dry down and they lock into place really well. The ColourPop Cream Gel liners are my favorite because they come in beautiful shades. These are very, very creamy. I wouldn't say they're quite as long lasting as Persona or Too Faced, but the majority of the Persona shades are matte, except for the bronze one. And then I think all of the Too Faced liners are matte, but ColourPop actually has like full-on metallic liners. And I think a metallic liner on the waterline is so beautiful. It just adds like a really pretty pop to the eyes. And obviously, depending on what color you go for, I think it can really complement a look or even make the look completely. So these are really great too. They do stay in place well for me, but I would say they're not quite as long lasting as Too Faced or Persona, but they have a ton of shades. They're really affordable, and the metallic liners, I haven't found anything quite like those from any other brand. Okay, I'm editing my video, and for some reason, I totally forgot to talk about my favorite mascaras. So my number one favorite is the Tower 28 Make Waves Mascara. This one does a really great job of lifting the lashes and curling them and giving you a ton of volume. It does lengthen the lashes, maybe not as much as a few other ones I love, but it's just like my perfect all-around go-to. It stays in place really well. I just repurchased it. I cannot get enough of it. Another one of my favorites is the Milani Highly Rated Anti-Gravity. This one also does a great job of giving your lashes a lot of volume, but this one makes them look a little bit longer than Tower 28. I wouldn't say it lifts and curls like Tower 28, and this one has a tendency to maybe get a little bit clumpy, but if you want dramatic, thick, long lashes, this one is such a good option. It's definitely one of my top 3. And then my third favorite is this one from Milani. This one is the Highly Rated Lash Extensions Mascara. It's kind of a finicky formula. It does have to dry out a little bit for it to perform its best, but it does not move. It's a tubing mascara. It stays in place well, and it makes your lashes look incredibly long. I will use it on the bottom lashes, but I also love using it on top of any other mascara to really seal it in. But again, it does have some pros and cons, but I do think if you let it dry out a little bit, it performs so well. For brow products, I just chose 3 instead of splitting it into different categories like brow gel, brow pencils, brow pens, because I don't necessarily have that many choices. So my number 1 brow gel is the NYX Thick It Stick It. I've talked about this so much on my channel, but it really has remained like a tried and true favorite. And I almost like it more now in 2023 than I did when I first tried it. And I think it's because I've tried a lot of other brow gels, and the reason why I like this one is because it's like the perfect all-in-one. It tints your brows, it holds them into place, it makes them look thick and full, and that's really like everything that I'm looking for out of a brow gel. So I will continue to repurchase this one. I don't know if anything will top it. Like I have other formulas I'll reach for, but that really is like the perfect all-around formula. NYX also makes my favorite brow pen. This is called, I always want to call it That's the Point. And I think that's maybe the name of one of their eyeliners. Otherwise, I don't know why I always think of that, but it's called the Lift and Snatch Brow Tint Pen. This is so good. I think it's the best one I've tried because the brush is very, why is this one leaking too? Maybe just because I'm like shaking these products all around, or I do typically store this one upside down, but that's never really an issue for me. Anyway, the reason why I like this one is because it's a very small, very flexible, very natural brush tip, and that can really make or break a brow pen. I've tried a lot of brow pens in the past where they've had like very thick applicators, and when they're too thick, you can't get like a very realistic look with them unless you know you're looking to fill in your entire brow. But usually when I'm using a brow pen, I just kind of want to like fill in any sparse areas and add a textured look to them. And the way this one is designed is perfect. They also have a lot of shades. My last favorite is the Urban Decay Brow Blade. I just can't give this one up. Even though I have other brow pencils and brow pens I love, there's just something about this one. Like sometimes I'll reach for this one over other formulas, just depending on how my brows look. And I can't really even explain the reason why. Like sometimes I just know I need my Urban Decay Brow Blade. I think this pencil is better than other pencils because it is very long lasting. And sometimes with brow pencils, they're almost like a little bit too subtle. They feel kind of waxy and you don't get good color payoff. And that's not the case with this one. This one is just a different texture. So you almost have to be kind of careful when you apply it because it is a little more intense. But I like that because I feel like I don't have to go over the same area multiple times. It has really good pigment for a pencil. Okay, let's finish up with lip products. Let's start with lip gloss. Again, this is a category that was kind of hard for me to narrow it down because there are so many good lip gloss formulas out there, but I feel pretty confident with my choices. So the first one is something that's a little bit newer to me. It's from LYS. This is the Forget the Filler Lip Plumping Line Smoothing Lip Gloss. This is a very thick, plush, luxurious feeling lip gloss. If you have like a lot of fine lines and you like a very smooth look and you like that juicy, plumped up look, this is the perfect formula. It does make your lips look really full, and it's not that it like stings them and burns them and plumps them up that way. It's the fact that this is so glossy and so smoothing. It also feels very hydrating on the lips and it lasts really well. It does have a little bit of like a sticky feel to it, but not in a bad way. I just find that it stays in place well and it's very beautiful. It's a little bit more sheer than I originally thought it was going to be. And I think when I saw the photos online, I thought they were going to be super colorful, really intense. And that's not the case with the 2 shades I have. So I would say if you don't typically love super saturated lip gloss, to kind of maybe take a chance on it or go in and swatch them because they're definitely less intimidating in person. But you can also wear a lip liner underneath if you do want like that true intense color payoff, which I do sometimes too. But I love this formula. I do want to try more of them. Another great option if you do love like a good, thick, plush feeling lip gloss is this formula from Kaja. I'm actually wearing one of these today. This was a limited edition shade. I have the color Berry Slushy on my lips over like a pink lip liner, but they only have 4 shades online. I keep waiting for them to launch additional shades, and I hope they will soon because this formula is so good. It's very, very hydrating, really smooth on the lips too. It doesn't have like that tacky feel that the LYS formula does. So if you want like that line smoothing, thick plush gloss without the stickiness, this is a really good alternative. The last formula I wanted to share in today's video is from Fenty. Fenty still makes one of my favorite gloss formulas, and at this point they have all different ones. So they have the Gloss Bomb creams, they have the original Gloss Bombs, and then the Gloss Bomb heats. And then they do have like a an icy version too. Out of all of them, the heat version is my favorite because it does have like a nice plumping feature to it, and I do find that it actually plumps up the lips well. There is a little bit of a burn to it. It's nothing too over the top, but I just think these glosses look really pretty. They have the most beautiful colors, and again, they give your lips like that full appearance. Even the non-plumping versions, because they're very smooth, incredibly glossy. They're definitely lighter, like more lightweight than the other two formulas I just shared. Not quite as thick or cushiony, definitely more of like a traditional lip gloss formula. But I love them. I think they are really, really pretty. I feel like I cheated a little bit because for the lip oil category, I actually included a formula that's kind of marketed as a gloss. But when it comes down to it, I definitely consider this to be more of like an actual lip oil than a gloss. And this is from CoverGirl. It is their Clean Fresh Yummy Gloss formula. I mean, I've heard people say that they consider this to be more of a gloss. A lot of people say more of a lip oil. It's a very thin, super glossy formula, and it does have a little bit of an oily feel to it, but it's really, really similar to other lip oil formulas I've tried. They have a bunch of shades. These are very, very sheer though, so you don't necessarily need to run out and buy like 10 different shades. I actually ended up with quite a few of these ever since they launched because I keep buying them, but in the end, a lot of them end up looking very similar on the lips. They have the best fruity scent. They're very shiny, super glossy. They wear off pretty quickly, so again, very similar to a lip oil. I feel like you have to end up reapplying them fairly often throughout the day. They have a little bit of a tingle to them because I think if you read the description online, they claim to plump the lips a little bit. I wouldn't say there's any really obvious plumping with this product, but there is like a little bit of a tingle when you actually wear them. So I think they're great if you do like more of a lip oil feel. I mean, I would consider these to be a lip oil, even though they're marketed as a gloss. And I love them. I think they're amazing. Actually, all of my lip oil favorites are from the drugstore. I also love the Milani Fruit Fetish lip oils. These are so good. They were actually one of the first lip oil formulas I ever tried. They have like a gorgeous range of nudes that they just came out with. The original ones were like pinks and berries, and they're all so, so pretty. And again, they have like a very fruity scent. I love the large oversized doe foot applicator. These are interesting because they kind of have a little bit of like a gel-like texture. Like you can see in the actual tube when you pull the applicator out, they're not incredibly oily. They're not super runny or overly thick. They almost look like an actual gel in the bottle. I've heard some people say they don't love this formula, and that might be why. If you love a really runny lip oil or really thick, luxurious lip oil, these are different. Like they're very light, very glossy and shiny, but they have that gel-like texture, which I think is really pretty, but it's just different. It's kind of unique. And then the last lip oil I wanted to share, I guess I would, again, kind of maybe consider more of a gloss, but they do market these as lip oils. The NYX Fat Oil Lip Drips. For some reason, I never know how the name is meant to be said, even though I've looked it up a million times. These are really pretty. I've heard people say these are a good dupe to the Dior lip oils, and I don't know if that's true because I still haven't tried those. Dior is not cruelty-free, and I do choose to purchase cruelty-free products. But if they are a good alternative, these are a lot less expensive. And these are nice because they're longer lasting. They're still very thin, very glossy on the lips, but there's a little bit of like a tacky feel to them. So they don't wear off as quickly as the CoverGirl ones or the Milani ones. They're very hydrating, so pretty. They're definitely on the sheer side. So again, when I first saw these online, I was kind of intimidated by them, but they end up looking really natural and pretty on the lips. When it comes to lip liner, I feel like my favorites don't change too much year after year. So I think I've probably mentioned these first two formulas quite a bit over the last few years, but my go-to lip liner formula is from ColourPop. These are the Lippy Pencils. These are very, very affordable. They have a ton of shades to choose from. And every year around the holidays, they launch different sets. Like they do smaller sets. They also do like a big box of lip liners where you can get like a bunch of shades for a discounted price. And the reason why I think one of those sets is nice to have is because you have every color you need and the formula is really, really good. So I would probably recommend one of the smaller sets. Like they'll do a set of like 10 nudes, like light and deep nudes, or like 10 bright shades. And these are really creamy, so they're very easy to apply, but they stay in place so well. And I just think the colors they have are perfect. No matter what type of lipstick I want to wear on top or lip product I'm wearing on top, I can find one of their lip liners to go with it. I've actually used up like full lip liners from this line, which never happens because lip liners last forever, but sometimes I'll just use these as like my main lip color and add like a light lip oil or a light lip gloss on top because I love the shades ColourPop has created. I've talked a lot about the LA Girl lip liners as well. If a creamy lip liner is what you're mainly going for, I do recommend their Shockwave lip liners. Again, they do have some bright tones as well, but I love the line of nudes because they have like pinky nudes, they have neutral nudes, they have everything you're going for. And again, very creamy, super comfortable. They're not quite as long lasting as ColourPop or the next formula I'm going to mention, but if you're looking for more of like a creamy, comfortable formula, I do recommend these. And again, super affordable. Now, if you want a matte formula that does not move, definitely try this formula from About Face. These are super rich, incredibly pigmented, really intense, and again, just really beautiful tones. These are available at Ulta and they're not quite drugstore prices, but they're definitely less than high end. They kind of fall in the middle, but they really do feel like a high end or luxury formula. And these are very lightweight. Like they feel lighter than the ColourPop formula, than the LA Girl formula. It doesn't feel like you're wearing anything on the lips, which is kind of nice because sometimes lip liners feel very dry. And maybe you can deal with it because it locks your lipstick into place. The reason why I like these is because they're so airy, so comfortable, but they're also really, really long lasting. Okay, that's everything I wanted to share with you in today's video. Hopefully I didn't leave anything out. I don't think I did. Those are all of my top products in every single category. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments below what your top products are, whether you want to share like your top 3 or your number 1. I would love to hear from you. And I really appreciate you being here. If you like these types of videos, I'll link a couple of my other favorites or related videos in the description box below, and I'll see you very soon with a new one. Bye.